Good morning, and thanks you all for joining. My name is Albert Ajisior, and I'm mostly, Pam and I mostly focus on crop production systems. And so most of our examples are gonna be crop production systems, but we will be happy to answer any questions you have today. So today we'll be talking about just what is in the jug. If you just go to Costco or you go to Lowe's or Home Depot and grab something, what's in the jug, how to understand what you're applying in a proper way for you to apply those herbicide to kill stuff. And so, let me see. All right. So I'll mostly focus on weed control. And so as Dr. Prater talked about, if you identify a weed species, the next thing is not to take it home as a house plant, but start to find out how to actually kill that plant. And so I'll be talking mostly about weed control and then what you can do in terms of what the proper herbicide to apply in certain situations. And so when you talk about weed control, and Dr. Preda will be talking about integrated weed management later, so I will not cover all of these, but we have biological weed control, which means that you use something like a living organism to control that. You can graze it, if you find you have a beetle or something like a bag in your house, that you can put it on there, a goat pet that you can put out there to eat the weed, and that will be biological control. We also have cultural, which means that whatever you do to give your desirable species like an advantage over your weed or your noxious weed that you're trying to control. And we have physical, which means that you just use physical energy, you're holding that, digging those things up. And then the last but not least is chemical. I will focus mostly on chemical control today because we would agree that the first three are things that they are complicated, but at the same time, we quite familiar with how to hoe a weed or how to pull it. And Dr. Preda would cover those probably in more detail later during the presentation. So when we talk about chemical, which is herbicide weed control, we mostly categorize them into post-emergence, means that we apply them after the weeds are up. And in that case, they can be contact, which I'll cover in the next few minutes, or systemic. And this distinction makes a huge difference in terms of the kind of weeds that those chemicals or herbicide would control, and also just how the time in terms of the size of the weed which you apply those. We also have soil applied herbicide, and sometimes you hear people say soil sterilants and things. What that means is that we apply to the soil surface, and those are mostly applied sometime before the desirable and the weed come up, or sometime within the desirable species. And so you can go to, in the fall like this, you can go on top of when the snow has melted, you can just go apply something when nothing is growing now. And the idea is that those then would control any weeds that are trying to come up later in the year. And also within your cracks in the house and like your walkways, people apply those to the cracks and just to prevent weed from coming up. So this pre-emergence means that you apply before the weed comes up. Pre-plant means that if you are planting something, those are applied and incorporated before you are planting a desirable species. And lay-by kind of means that you just apply it there to kind of control weeds during the season when those are trying to come up. And so I would talk a lot about herbicide, and we all know herbicide, the common one is Roundup. And this is a name that frustrates me a lot because Roundup for lawn, come on. It's Roundup will kill your lawn. And so and before that, I would just want to say that there are proper ways to apply herbicide chemicals. And I would say that no matter what you do, I like killing stuff, but I would not look this closely to whatever I'm spraying. And so please, Pam would cover this in detail later on how to properly apply herbicide or pesticide weed control. So I mentioned that for post-emergence herbicide, we have contact and systemic. And contact means that they only kill the part of the plant they come into contact with. And this is an in-person thing. I would then walk to you and ask you, that means that if you want to kill the entire plant, then you would have to cover all the leaves on the plant when you're using the contact herbicide. And I will show you some examples what contact herbicide are when you grab those from the shelves. Because they don't move within the plant, as I said, you would have to cover the entire plant with those herbicides to be able to kill, or cover enough so that it will not be able to come up again when you kill this. I would say that because this is contact, it means that anything that has underground roots, like your counter thistle, your bindweed and things, this will not move into the root to kill those underground roots. What means is that you just kill the leaves off and those will come back. And so this distinction is absolutely important in your trying to control weeds on your property. Systemic means that they will move within the plant system. And so that means that if you contact just a few parts of the plant, you might be able to kill the entire plant. And so this is what you would use for something that has underground stems and roots, like your bindweed and stuff that would come out from those roots. And so you want something that will move into the plant system to be able to kill it. Good coverage is still important, but it's not as critical as contact herbicide I talked about. So this is just to give you like a visual aid. And I don't know if you can see my laser, but the contact means that if you contact these leaves at the top and you don't contact the bottom, those at the bottom would not die. If the plant has enough energy from those two leaves at the bottom, it might be able to come back. And so to absolutely kill everything, you would have to contact every single part of the plant. With systemic, if you cover the same amount of leaf area, the herbicide move through the plant system into the root to kill everything up. And so this is kind of what you should be thinking about when you buy something. I will show you examples going forward. So what is in the jug? We bought a forage harvester, and the guy who came to set it up for us, when he found out I was a weed scientist, was like, oh, I'll tell you a story. My wife sprayed glyphosate on a lawn to kill weeds, and she got frustrated that the weeds were not dying after a few days. So she went on a third day, applied more Roundup, and now they don't have it in lawn at all. And he says that the positive is that he doesn't have to mow anymore. It was a funny story, but this, in the next few slides, I will show you why this is important and why some of the chemical companies try to mix different chemicals for homeowners when you are buying those from the shelf. And please, you can close your eyes now and just listen to what I'm saying, and you don't have to learn any of these. But those herbicides that we use are classified into different site of action, which means that what they actually inhibit in a plant to kill the plant. And so if you take a photo of a herbicide label and it's sent to Doug, it's sent to Steve, it's sent to Dr. Prater, Dr. Hutchinson, or me, or any weed person, they would look at that and be like, oh, okay, it contains this ingredient, and so it might do X, Y, Z. And so we classify those classifications really help us to know, one, what weed they control, two, how long they might stay in the soil, or like how they even act, or like if it's appropriate for you to apply that. And so I will go through a few slides, kind of giving you examples of herbicide I will pull from the shelf. As I said, please, you don't need to know this. I just brought it up so that when you see in the slide, you know what to mean by these. So if you go to any agrochemical store to buy herbicide, they will have those group numbers that I just said on top here, and that tells us a lot about this. And Pam will go through how to read the label. And so this active ingredient, what actually kills the plant, is very important for us to know, okay, is it okay to apply this here? Does it do what it is? That would it kill this weed? And sometimes you see those herbicide labels that don't have those group numbers. And so please, if you have a question and want to ask us, you can either send a trade name to us or just take a photo of the front and it'll be like, oh, okay, this contains it. And so please don't apply to your lawn or this. And so I will start by this. So I went to town and just went to all the shops and trying to find out like an array of the herbicide they sell there to kind of give you an idea what those contain and why you might not apply into a certain situation. The first one I have is weed stop for lawns. And if you are applying this, you can see here it has group 4, group 4, group 4. And all these three here would not control any grass. And so you can apply any of these three herbicide straight to your lawn and to kill any broadleaf weeds, which means that anything that's not grass, and it will not hurt your grass. They also have another herbicide in there that will kill grasses and broadleaf weeds. And so they would say that it kills broadleaf weeds and grasses, but it's just one chemistry that is giving you that grassy weed control. And so please, if you have questions, it's also important to just take this front photo, and Pam would, as I said, will go through how to read the label for it to be able to make that determination. Ground clear year long. And I would say that once you see something that's a year long or extended control, it means that it has that soil applied component that will control weed seed that are coming up. What that also means is that if you apply any of these herbicides and then you want to plant something immediately after, you would have to call someone and be like, hey, I apply this, do you think it's safe for me to plant it? Because you might plant your desirable crop or plant and nothing would come out, because those year-long ones would have herbicide like this and like this one that would stick in the soil for a while, and those will control weed seeds that are about to come up. Now, I would mention that most of the chemical companies would throw in something that we call contact herbicide, which I explained earlier. And what this does is that it will start acting within a few minutes or an hour. So you can see here, they say visible results in an hour. And what they are trying to do is that to prevent what happened, I mentioned on the previous slide, where you don't think the herbicide is not working, so you're going to apply a second time. And so this acid, which is an organic herbicide, that will burn the leaves, start burning the leaves, and be like, oh, okay, this is working really well. And the actual activity was from mostly the other herbicide. And as I said, these are contact herbicide, which means that if the weeds are very big, you will not get good weed control. And so if you are buying something that has a contact herbicide in it, it means that you have to apply very early when the weeds are very small to control that. Ground clear weed and grass killer. And this is a contact herbicide. It's the work like an acid. And once again, you have to apply this when the weeds are very, very small to be able to kill these. And as you can see here, it starts acting in 15 minutes so that you don't see like, oh, okay, it's not working, I apply a second one. And so that it's really good to know. Roundup extended control. As I mentioned, when you see that extended, it means that it has an herbicide component that will control weed seed that are coming up. And this first one, that's what would give you that soil activity. And that's mostly used in rangeland system to control cheatgrass. It's been a go-to herbicide for years. And this glyphosate, a Roundup, good friend, that would control anything that's up already. So it will not control anything that's yet to come up. And once again, they tend to throw in this acid that would kind of give you activity very quickly. Max control, once again, is just the two chemistries. And if you go back, they just replace that acid with another contact herbicide. And what this does, again, give you that fast activity. So you see that plants have started dying, so you don't want to apply a second one. If you apply a second dose of this, that means that you double the soil activity. And that means that instead of, they said here that it gives you up to 12-month control, you might extend that period. So if you are planning to plant something after that, you might have to wait way longer. And we are not covering that today, but there are ways you can tell if the herbicide has degraded enough in the soil for you to plant your desirable crop species. Ground clear is super, and I would say that when we see group 1 herbicide, kind of opposite of the group 4 that only control broadleaf, they also only control grasses. And so if you have just a grass patch that you want to control, like in your flower bed or something, the group 1 herbicide are a go-to herbicide for you. And there is one on this example here that I'll share with you in the next few minutes. Well, once again, they will throw in that contact herbicide. So this will give you the broadleaf control, this will give you the grassy weed control, This will give you the fast activity so that you don't apply a second dose to that area. Grass be gone. And so this, as I said, would have only a grass herbicide, and this only kill grasses. And so if you have a flower bed, you have a sagebrush patch, and I'd be like, okay, I don't want to kill this. I only want to kill the grasses that are coming. This is a kind of herbicide for you to only kill the grasses without hurting your broadleaf plants. And weed be gone, and that contains group 4 herbicide. Once again, this only control broadleaves. And so like if you have a grass area and you want to control anything broadleaf, and this will be the go-to herbicide for you. As I said, it has dandelion and clovers here. And so for a noxious weed, you have a broadleaf weed, and then this will be herbicide to use around your homes. And this is my favorite weed herbicide name, Dead Weed Brew. And that's just a combination of 2 acids, and that will just quickly burn everything off. And once again, you see that fast activity from this herbicide. And these are 2 organic herbicides apply. If you apply when the leaves are very small, weeds are very small, you get a very good activity. I think this is the last one on the list, the brush killer. It is a group 4 herbicide for killing brushes. As I said, this is a systemic herbicide, and so if you are applying something around like your apple trees or something that you don't want to die, please just be careful, and this will kill anything that's small, bushy brush type plant. And there's also broadleaf that will not kill any grass, and so just pay attention. I will tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then when you are trying to do your own cocktail mixture of the herbicide, just be careful, and please do call one of us to be like, hey, can I mix this with this? And the good way to find that one out is on the label, and Pam would cover that. But if you are not sure, please always call us. Once you see mixtures like that, as I presented earlier, it gives you broad spectrum control because it can mix grass and broadleaf herbicide. That means that if you apply it on area that want to kill everything, that gives you that opportunity to do just one application to kill grasses and broadleaves at the same time. Sometimes it gives a more consistent control. Sometimes they are able to let you use lower rates when you combine herbicide like that. And sometimes it just minimize resistance development, which is probably something that would cover in subsequent classes, and what is resistance and how to prevent that on your property. So there are different types of mixtures. So those that I presented, like Roundup, Max Control, those are package mix. And so like the manufacturer just mix those for you already. Those are safe to use because they determine that those are compatible to be mixed together. You can do your own tank mix, means that you buy a grass herbicide, a broadleaf herbicide, you mix them together. That's where the problem comes, and you have to know if it is okay to mix those, and I'll show you why in a minute. Or you can do sequential application. You can apply the grass herbicide first, come back and apply a broadleaf herbicide. But that's what's how the manufacturers try to avoid, so apply only once. And also, we have what's called residue, where you apply something like, and then you apply a second dose of it, and so you have something in the soil already and apply something else. This becomes critical if you are planning to plant something after your application. So just be careful. If you apply those extended control herbicide, don't apply twice. EPA has a policy on all tank mixtures. Now I want to read this to you. You may mix this herbicide if it's not prohibited by the label. So once again, Pam will go through the label. And the dosage you use should be at or below the rate used alone. If you are mixing 2 things, you cannot double the rate. And so just make sure that you follow that. If you decide to mix herbicide, then you assume all the risk. You cannot go back to the store and be like, hey, what you sold me is not working. And so you just have to keep that in mind. If you mix different herbicide, there's what we call chemical incompatibility. And what that means is that there'll be a reaction among the different herbicide components that you will not see with your naked eye. And what you might see is that it might not work well, or if it's not supposed to kill your flowers, you might start killing your flower because it's working too well. Because when you mix those 2 herbicides, they are helping each other work better. And we have different terminology for that, which I'll cover in the next second. We have to what we call the synergy, which is mostly a good thing. But what that means is that if you apply herbicide A and B by themselves and you apply them together, they work together when you apply them. They work better when you apply them together than apply them individually. So if you apply one today in the morning and follow it in the afternoon, the control you would get would be different than when you apply them as a tank mix. And so kind of like they are helping each other work better. It's not always a good thing because sometimes, as I said, the herbicide I can apply in your flower bed without killing your flowers, or a herbicide I can apply at the back of your house to control certain species and leave some out. If they are helping each other work better, sometimes you end up seeing more injury to your desirable species. So one example would be this herbicide MCPA. It doesn't control grasses. So you apply to feral rye, it even seems like it's even helping the rye grow better. But then when you mix that with another herbicide we call Mazamox, which is Raptor, or forgot the other name we use in Clearfield wheat, you tend to get more control of the species. That's what we call synergism. It means that the combined effect is way higher than when you add the individual effect of those two herbicides. And so when you are mixing herbicide, this is one thing to keep in mind. And so here it's saying that the control of feral rye will, with imazama, was increased, even though the MCPA has no control of the wheat species you are trying to control. The other thing, which is the bad, is antagonism, which means is that one herbicide or pesticide reduce the efficacy of the other one. And this happens a lot, especially when you mix on the broadleaf herbicide like 2,4-D with your grass herbicide. And so just be careful when you're trying to mix those herbicides. And so, for example, this is grass herbicide that is labeled for weed control in small grains. It controls, like, if you apply that at 1 pound by itself, you get 90% control. When you throw in some 2,4-D, you get 60% control. And so the 2,4-D actually reduce the efficacy of the other one. And so just be careful when you're mixing different herbicides. And last but not least, we have what we call additive response, which means that if you apply the two separately, the response you get is the same as when you make the two together. And so, like, you don't have any change in activity. And so in that point, there's no interaction at all. This is a month here, but you don't have to pay attention to any of that. What it means is that you don't get any advantage or disadvantage either ways, but there's no effect. And then I mentioned what we call the chemical incompatibility, which means that things that you don't see, and those are the three examples where we see antagonism, additive reaction, or synergism. Sometimes you see physically that it will gang up in your sprayer, and then you will not be able to get it out of the nozzle. That's what we call physical incompatibility. And so there is a possibility that you might not be able to use a sprayer again if you go mix two herbicides. And so please, if you are not sure or it's not stated on the label, make sure you ask someone before you go ahead and mix those. And so I want to close by saying that please always read and follow the label. And you can call any of us with questions and we'll be more than happy to help. And Pam will take you through reading the label